$5 clearing price. We're almost there. By definition, when we put a tariff on an imported Vietnamese good, the hat, what we are effectively saying is American companies cannot compete at that $5 price point because otherwise you don't need a tariff.
Unless there is unfair trade practice.
There's no unfair hat trade practice, let me tell you. So what
there's a high percentage chance that the hat manufacturer in Vietnam really is via China and they're just using it to evade tariffs.
Cool, we get real cheap hats. Like this is a great thing.
But that would be by definition unfair trade practice.
I mean, like, I don't know why we think Chinese giving us cheap they subsidize is a bad thing, but like we can go have that argument.
If it puts our manufacturers out of business.
We don't want to make this stuff. And here's like the point.
Do you think that people in middle of America would make that hat if they could make the numbers work?
What's up, guys? We've got a great episode for you today. I sit down with Zach Weinberg, somebody who doesn't really like the tariffs nearly as much as I do, and we debate all the nuances, and it's actually kind of fun. We find out things where we agree, we find out things that we don't agree, and my guess is that as we go through this debate, you're gonna learn a heck of a lot, both of the bull and the bear argument. So enjoy this conversation with Zach Weinberg. He was a fantastic intellectual thinking partner for this conversation, and I learned a lot, so I hope you do as well. Enjoy this conversation.
All right, Zach, I got my notes. You got your notes. Hopefully we don't actually have to look at them. But we're going to talk tariffs. I think that there's maybe some like ground assumptions that we have to lay out. Let's see if we agree or disagree. The first one is, do we agree that there are two different experiences in America? I feel like that's like a core kind of component of the Trump administration and their views on this is like, there's rich people, they've been, killing it for 50 years. The economy's worked for them. And then there's like this other group of people, they call them like the working class, and the economy has failed them. They're falling behind. They're in debt. They don't have assets. The middle class has been hollowed out. All the talking points that you hear them regurgitate over and over. Like, do you buy that, or do you think that that's like an oversimplification?
I think it's wrong.
Okay.
And I think the data would show you that there's a massive difference between reality and perception. And we can talk about why that gap exists, but just like a few basic facts. And it's not, by the way, it's not to say that there aren't struggling people in America. Absolutely. There's struggling people in every country. But at a baseline level, America is the richest nation in the world. We have the highest median income of any major developed nation, right? We're essentially probably like number 2 to Luxembourg. We've been growing faster than every other economy that's developed, right? So we kind of leave out, developing nations who will grow faster from a much lower baseline. Incomes are up, savings are up. Like Americans objectively are the richest people in the world. Now, that doesn't mean that people still aren't struggling, but at the end of the day, this idea that we've hollowed out our middle class is just not true. It's not true. We have a thriving middle class. Now, we have some problems, which I would really focus on related to costs, right? So if you make $100,000 a year, I mean, we have plumbers in America, just to kind of give it some teeth. We have plumbers in America that make more than doctors in the UK. Mm-hmm. We have electricians in America that make more than physicians in all of Europe. These are like MD, PhD trained people, and we have blue collar trade workers who make more money than most of these other groups, right? These are exceptionally well-paid people. Now, you don't feel rich, I think for two reasons, and we can debate why. One, I think is simply that you have really, really expensive housing. Mm-hmm. Like the United States housing supply has not kept up with our wealth and our population growth. And so when you have a ton of people with money chasing a limited supply of houses, prices go up, housing as a percentage of your income goes up, and you feel poorer. And I think housing is probably like the single biggest challenge America has in terms of making people feel comfortable in their lifestyle. That's number one. Two, and we don't have to talk about like the rise of TikTok and social media, because I hate it. But like, I do think there's a perception of lack of wealth because you see so much fake shit on the internet. Like
if you go on, everyone's on a vacation 24/7, you feel like, holy shit, why can't I do that?
Exactly. And so like, even though the objective data tells you, Americans are richer than everybody else and doing better than everybody else, it doesn't feel that way because you don't see the everybody else. You see the like clipped version of the Instagram post. And I think it's really unfortunate. I don't have a good answer for how you solve that.
So here's my question on this. Do the facts matter or do the feelings matter? And recently, Besant gave an interview to the All In guys, and there was 2 parts of the interview that I thought were really fascinating. I hadn't heard anyone in the administration talk about before. And I think it's clear. I've been pretty clear with people. I'm an independent. I'm not Republican. I'm not Democrat. I have no party allegiance. Frankly, I think both sides are stupid sometimes. I think they both do good things. Do you have like a leaning, just so people know, or not really?
I would say, like, if you rolled back the Democratic Party to the party that was in power with Bill Clinton, and even kind of like the early versions of Obama that were kind of like pro-growth, smaller government, pro-business. And I think what the Dems, and I go back to Bill Clinton, I think what the Dems got right, and I was a Democrat for sure at the time, was if you grow the pie, if you make the pie of America bigger, right? And the way you grow a pie in any economy is through private business, right? You make stuff people want to buy. That causes people to have jobs. There's income. That income cycles through. You continue to grow. Like, the economy is not a fixed
Careful.
pie.
You're starting to sound like a Republican right now.
Well, this is what I was going to go with, because like
They swapped.
we used to have debates. Because nobody watches this shit anymore, so nobody knows. But like, you go back and you look at like the Clinton, Bush, that era of debates, and what these guys were arguing about was like, who's going to grow America faster?
100%.
It was fucking amazing. And that was and then the Democrats were really a little bit more about, okay, if the pie is big, we're going to tax you a little bit more, and we're going to redistribute that excess tax. So like, yes, I would make a little bit less money, but it's for a good cause, and the underlying economy is strong because it's growing. Plus, I think I agreed very heavily with Democrats on social issues. And then that kind of went off the rails recently, you know, over the last, whatever, 6 to 10 years or so, where somehow business and growth and profit and entrepreneurship and all the things that make America exceptional relative to basically every other country in the world were vilified by the Democratic Party. Not every person, but in places, and very publicly. And there was no loud, moderate voice. I mean, the loudest voice in the Democratic Party is a socialist, right? And Bernie Sanders, who's, by the way, when you view like what Trump is doing and what Sanders are doing, or Sanders wants to do, very similar things. So that definitely turned me off to like the current version of
Do you think
the
they
Democratic
swapped?
Party.
Like, is it a fair, here's one of my mental frameworks right now. Is it true statement to say that Trump is a Democrat, which he was for most of his life, that now has taken over the Republican Party, and he basically took a lot of the working class, you know, policies and anti-war, like all the things that the Democrats believed in, and he somehow has like brought them over to the Republican Party and then created a split in the Republican Party where he's been able to siphon off a ton of attention and support from them, but they're actually, like, to your point, you know, Democrat beliefs from 30 years ago.
I think he's taken some of the worst parts of the Democratic Party and made it his policy position. I think he picked off like 80% of the dumbest things you could possibly do. And it's like, that's what I want, because he's not a Democrat and he's not a Republican. He's a populist. And that is a different beast. It doesn't fit our political framework of left or right, because it isn't left or right. It's populist. It's meant to appeal to the working class, whatever they want to feel emotionally, not logically, but emotionally. He's just going to say it, even if it's flat out incorrect, and he will lie. And that is neither left nor right. And I think both parties have crumbled in a way that is really unfortunate. I think the Dems moved really hard left. The right's now moved populist. They're both anti-business in these weird ways. They're both like anti-growth, or at least have been. So I was a Democrat. I view myself much more as an independent.
Which I think is the trend across demographics.
Yes.
Is like many more people feel, I call it like politically homeless.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're like, the default is I have to be an independent because I feel like neither party is serving, you know, the way that I view the world.
I think that's right. I think what you're going to see is moderating the Democratic Party back, because they're going to be forced to. If you want to win elections, you need to have popular policies, and Dems have not. And so, you know, popular policies around growth and housing costs and all of that, I think will pull the Dems back. And we have a few people out there like Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, who I think is exceptional. Jared Polis in Colorado. You know, there are a few, Pritzker even in Illinois. Like, there's a few Democratic governors who I think are really strong voices. The congressional Democrats are a little bit of a disaster. But yeah, I was a Dem, and I don't identify necessarily as one today.
All right. So let's get back to the Besant conversation. So the All In guys, they ask him, and he said something, I'm going to paraphrase, but he basically was like, all the data was telling us that the economy was great, but then people were saying, I don't feel great.
Sure.
And I think what he came to the conclusion of was, you can't trust the data. You got to listen to the people, which I thought was coming from the Treasury Secretary who comes from Wall Street, who's a trader, who's very quantitative. Like everything about his background would tell you he trusts the data.
Yeah.
And so that was the first thing where he was like, hey, the people are telling us something.
Well, I want to be clear. Like, I don't think that's wrong. Like, I agree in the sense that there's a giant bolus of Americans and it spans Democrats and Republicans and white and black and, you know, who don't feel like
it's working.
It's working for them. And I think they just got the reasons why completely wrong. They got the absolute wrong reasons. And let's just talk about a little bit of like why people don't feel wealthy, leaving social media aside for 1 second. One is the underlying cost structure of the shit they have to buy to survive has not declined in price. Like the prices of the stuff they want to purchase, and in particular housing, and the amount of money and income and growth that they've had
wages haven't kept up with the inflation.
And it's real. It's not even inflation. Like groceries have gotten cheaper, consumer goods have gotten cheaper, electronics have gotten cheaper. We have Netflix, we have flat screen TVs for $150. We have Amazon that'll deliver you toothpaste for like $4. Like the basics are actually really, really cheap. Housing and healthcare. Like we talk about all goods and all this, none of this shit matters. Housing and healthcare. If you look at the budget of like a typical person making $65,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, and you go, what percentage of their budget is taken up by housing and healthcare, both indirectly and directly, because you pay for your healthcare through lower wages in America, probably 70%. And that number will vary.
Both of those sectors are highly regulated. Government very involved,
yes.
Which I think that if, again, you listen to Besant, which I focus on Besant because I feel like Besant has, in a weird way, he's the glue here between like the private business, Wall Street, and then the like political views of the White House. He talks a lot about like deleveraging the public market or the public sector and re-leveraging or driving a lot of that stuff to the private sector. And he's like, basically all the job growth, all these things happen in the public sector. We became very top heavy and kind of bureaucratic. Right. We need now to deleverage that, and we need to go back more to a private sector, type business, which if they can do it, if is a huge if, because a lot of detail in there, but if they could do that, it sounds like if all of a sudden you could now take a housing sector and deregulate and push that more into the private hands, that should lead to lower housing. Healthcare, same thing.
Well, I think we're confusing a bunch of different things here.
Right.
So let's start with like housing, right? Because I think that's kind of the easiest one to take a look at. Housing supply has not kept up with housing demand. Okay. Right. As Americans get richer and richer, we want newer stuff. We want bigger houses. We want more luxury, and local regulations have prevented market forces from keeping up with supply.
I say all the time, city councils are one of the most dangerous groups in all of America.
Absolutely. It's the most anti-American thing in the world to basically say you can't build here, because all it's doing is taxing poor people. Like NIMBYism is a tax on poor people. And the irony is NIMBYism has been a very progressive thing. We're very like, pro redistribution. And the one major policy they have is like kind of like screwing over the poorest Americans. So I think housing is it's a regulatory issue. It tends to be a local regulatory issue, but that's the cause of high priced housing, is the fact that we can't build. And there's a bunch of things that go wrong. It's not just
so if you had to pinpoint, which it sounds like we might agree on this, if you had to pinpoint one thing to change that could actually bring housing down, it would be deregulate at the local level, the housing zoning stuff, so that you could actually go build housing wherever it's needed and let the market kind of figure out where it's needed and what type is needed.
Remove the 35 different ways local governments block developers from building housing.
Yeah. So deregulate.
Deregulate. Absolutely.
All right. You sound like Republican. Keep going.
I sound like an old Republican. And like, give me those Republicans. Bring me back Mitt Romney. Give me the binders full of women. Like I want that Republican.
By the way, I'm like half joking, but here, the reason why this is like so funny to me is because I recently, again, I'm an independent. I don't have the allegiance, whatever. And then I like started thinking about like all these things, and I'm like, wait, it's a moving target. Like it was Democrat, then it's Republican, and like it's moved back over the last 100 years, whatever. But like right now, actually, the Republican Party is saying, I think, a lot of the things that people in the business and tech world, they're like, hey, the deregulation is a potential, if not the solution to housing, right? And so like, you don't see the Democrat Party saying that. And maybe that's okay.
They are starting to. I actually do think, you look at New York City, for example, and Mayor Adams, and now he's an independent, but like City of Yes. And so I do think yeah, well, I think you're seeing like local Democratic leaders, especially in major cities, and New York is probably the biggest one that's pushing ahead here, realize that housing costs are screwing over the city. Because if the housing is too expensive, smart young people don't work here because they can't afford it. And then the economy slows because like most of these great jobs or growth engines, if you will, want to hire smart young workers. And if they're not here, they're not going to grow here. So it's actually a giant drag on the economy. It makes New York or any state poorer by having housing prices so high because it moves smart young people away from the city. It is really stupid. And that is a major issue. I actually think, you know, most intelligent people, left, right, center, when you explain housing supply being restricted, kind of understand how supply and demand works, right? Like if you add more supply, prices come down, right? You make more stuff, there's less demand on the marginal house, and so the price comes down because there's more supply available. Like this is just econ 101, right? If you produce 1 billion eggs or you produce 1,000 eggs, like guess which eggs are going to be cheaper, right? Yep. The billion eggs. And the same thing is true in housing, and that's a real problem. Now, I think the challenge is that the housing costs are such a large percentage of your budget that you think it's like capitalism that isn't working for you. And actually the things that's not working for you is anti-capitalism isn't working for you, right? Like housing is not a capitalist market-driven, you know, force anymore because we've regulated it to death where you can't build. And so really the issue in housing is capitalism is not being allowed to thrive. And so I want to put that one to bed because I think like housing actually is probably the biggest issue. Two, there is this common like belief out there that Bessent is talking about and some of the other Republicans have talked about, which is that all of the growth of jobs in the United States have been government jobs. And it is flat out fake news.
I think it's 25%.
It's 20. By the way, it's 25% just in the last few years because we saw this really weird blip with COVID. If you go all the way back to the beginning of Biden's term, it's 11%. 11%. So nearly 90% of job growth in America has been the private sector. And then if you break that 11% down, it's mostly local government. Federal workforce has remained essentially flat over the last 20 years. It moves up and down a little bit here and there. And I have some charts. We're not going to be able to show it here, but maybe I'll email them to you after. But the federal workforce as a percentage of the total workforce has actually gone down.
Numbers directionally correct, right? Exact ones we'll probably won't get perfectly, but I think one of the things that people look at is they say, what is the percentage of Americans getting jobs? Because
we have 4% unemployment.
Well, a second, but we'll get to the data in a second. I think there's a lot of people who are saying, wait a second, all of the job growth has been going to non-native born Americans. Now that's legal immigrants and illegal immigrants, right? And so they don't really break out those numbers. So it's very hard to kind of tell what that percentage is. But I think a huge part of the pain that people are feeling is they're saying, hey, wait a second here. The government jobs that Americans are getting are a much higher percentage of the Americans who are getting jobs.
No.
Well, of course it is.
It's like, yes, in the sense that the U.S. government doesn't hire illegal workers, but that is not the problem. Like you still have 89% of job growth coming from the private sector, which is what you want to see. Like that is a good thing, right? Private sector job growth is good for America. It means the American economy is thriving. I understand that people think you've got like illegal immigrants stealing jobs, but the reality is most of the stuff that illegal immigrants are stealing, if you really want to think about it, are extremely low wage, you know, fruit picking, retail, like these are not the jobs that everybody thinks the middle class in the United States want. Now, I'm not here, to be very clear, to defend illegal immigration. I think illegal immigration, bad. Legal immigration, great, very good.
Yep.
And if you put me in charge, we do not maybe at the egregious level they're doing today, but we would enforce our laws around illegal immigration and we would reform our legal immigration laws to bring the best and the brightest here.
And I think one of the things that's not controversial is that most legal immigrants actually have very strong views on illegal immigration. Like I waited in line, I did the work, I did everything I was supposed to do. I followed the law. Why is somebody else just walking across the border?
Legal immigration in the United States is one of the single biggest growth opportunities we have because legal immigrants work hard, start businesses, and they grow the pie. It is not a fixed pie. We have lost sight of how economics work. It isn't one slice. It's not a pizza that you break into 8 pies and the minute you make a smaller slice, you have less pizza. It's not how it works. The pie gets bigger. If the pie were fixed, we'd still be living in fucking medieval times, farming for everything and growing potatoes all day. Like clearly the pie can grow. And so growth of the pie is the single most important thing in America.
All right.
I want to go back to like people's beliefs, right? So they feel poor. Why do you feel poor? You feel poor because people are telling you you're poor, which is a whole Fox News thing. You see it online. Your housing costs are up. We can talk about healthcare costs, but when you compare this, and I know it's hard for people to feel poor and then realize that it's way worse everywhere else. But I just want to go with it's way worse everywhere health.
Yeah, they don't care about that, but it can be true and them not care at the same time.
I totally agree. And so I'm not trying to say your feelings are not justified. I think they're perfectly justified. I think the reasons for feeling poor are simply not what our political parties are focused on. For me, it's all about growth. It's deregulating housing so housing gets cheaper. There's a bunch of healthcare stuff we could talk about. And then it's unleashing the American economy to grow, which typically means pro-business policies, all right, growth policies, if you will.
So,
but that was the baseline facts. I don't think we agree on. I think people have been lied to in terms of statistics. Like there was a Trump administration official. I don't think it was Bessent. It was probably Retardo. What do they call him now? Peter Retardo. Probably him, who was like on Fox News. I wish I brought this clip. And he's like 75% of the jobs created in the last 4 years under the Biden administration were public sector jobs. He's on public television. This is a Trump administration official saying 75%. I'll find the clip. Nothing about that statement is true. It is a flat out lie. He's out there telling you that the sky is blue or the sky is green and it's blue. Like he's lying to your face. And I think it makes sense to me why people believe this stuff, because you wouldn't believe that some official would get the 75% number inverted. And he did. He got the wrong number.
All right. So let's say, let's just say that
this happens over and over and over again.
But here's Bessent in that same interview with the All In guys. This to me was the most shocking. I actually thought that we would have a market sell-off because of what he said here. Chamath Palihapitiya says to Bessent, he says, GDP, job growth, inflation, he lists a couple of metrics. He goes, do you believe them? And the first word out of Scott Bessent's mouth is no. And then he very quickly realizes that he's on a recorded podcast and he kind of like cleans it up and, has a more kind of politically appropriate answer. But what he basically says, and then he leads into this idea that like, hey, the numbers were telling us something good. The people were telling us something different. We have to learn to trust the people, blah, blah, whatever. So that was shocking to me because you have the Treasury Secretary basically saying, we know the data is inaccurate. And so
no, he's not saying we know the data is inaccurate. He's saying, I think maybe, by the way, which data? And why is it inaccurate? So here's how inaccurate is it?
Hold on. Here's a good example. The job growth data.
Sure.
Right. There's this big revision. And again,
well, revising job growth data is how it works.
No, of course. But here's my thing.
Constantly revising.
It is true that it got revised. It is true that it was definitely overcounting. But to your point, it's not shocking thing.
No, it's not overcounting. The job tracking data on job growth is a complex process. There's a lot of estimation going on, and the data lags. The data lags because you hire people, you have to report the data to the government. It takes some time to aggregate that stuff and analyze it. You also have to tease out what is seasonal workers versus non-seasonal workers, because you get like seasonal healthcare workers, you get seasonal retail workers, you get seasonal farming workers. Like it is complicated. It's not just like have job, not have job. And so, yes.
Could you do it better?
Yes, I could probably. I mean,
right. But this is the point. They never undercount. It's always they overcount.
No, they do undercount. They do undercount. Sometimes they get revised up and sometimes they get revised down. And I'm not suggesting every single month is perfect because it's not meant to be perfect. But you look at it over the course of multiple years and you're not going to have drastic swings. You would see mass unemployment. If it was undercounting, you see mass unemployment, and we don't see that.
No, but when they well, hold on, we'll get to unemployment in a second. But when they revised it down, I think that I can't remember the exact number.
What is it? They revised 1 month down? Like
no. It was like the last year. Erased like all the job growth over the last like year or two. So like all this job growth that we thought we had, we actually didn't have. And I think that goes back to this idea of, so take the inflation number, right? I very public about the fact that I think that the trueflation number, which is kind of a real-time alternative inflation metric, that they're looking at what are the price changes on, grocery store websites, they have all these data feeds that are more real-time. That's more accurate than the CPI number. And in December of last year, the trueflation number was higher than the government number. 2 months later, the government number goes up. Now the trueflation number has crashed, 50% in the last 3 months.
Well, yeah.
And we expect to see the CPI number to come down.
We ripped money out of the economy.
Of course.
Rates went up. Of course it comes down. Yeah.
But my point is that regardless of what Bessent was saying, like I actually think that saying the data is not accurate is probably an accurate statement.
It's not though. It's like saying, I don't have a great analogy for this, but like sometimes I feel healthy and sometimes I don't. Like, yes, on a month-to-month basis, these data points move because they're complicated data points. But when you smooth it out over time, this is like a directionally accurate set of metrics. And it's not one metric, it's multiple metrics, right? You're looking at unemployment, you're looking at job growth, you're looking at GDP growth, you're looking at incomes, and you kind of triangulate across all of them because the data is complicated to work across. It is very easy to be like, the data is wrong. It's like the easiest statement in the world to dismiss things. There's this unbelievable quote, and I think it applies basically to Chamath, which is, and I think it's from Justified. Have you ever watched that like horrible show on FX? Anyway, the quote is basically something like, if during your day you meet one asshole, you've met one asshole. If during your day everybody you meet is an asshole, you're the asshole. And I think that is what's going on here, which is like, you can't just claim everything is fake and broken because you don't agree with it. You're the asshole. You're the one making up the data. And so like,
no, but hold on. But I think that it is like, this is like objectively true, where when people go and they look at the data, right? Like here's a good example. So I had a central banker, he came on and we talked about the inflation number. And his point was, we know what the discrepancies are. We know what the inaccuracies are. We know it lags. Like he called out all the problems, right?
Yeah.
But he's like, but we all have agreed that we're going to use this metric.
By the way, all right, let's talk about inflation. Because, on the one, like inflation data is complex because it's, you have to the United States government does chain weighted inflation, and like we don't have
but they made that complex.
Yes, I agree. You ask economists to do something, they're going to make it complicated. And there's like chain weighted inflation measures is a very difficult thing to do well and to do consistently, because basically it's trying to account for the increase in the quality of the good. This is the part of inflation that is really difficult to measure, right? Because like if you have a car, let's just use cars as an example, and 10 years ago it was $20,000. And now that, like, let's call it the Honda Accord, was $20,000. And now the Honda Accord is $30,000. And right now it's actually probably closer to like $40,000. And we should talk about why. That Honda Accord from a quality perspective is not the same car, right? Like this worse. New car, it got better. It got better.
Maybe.
It's got safety features. It's got airbags. It has driving assist. It has a screen. It can do Bluetooth. Like it's got a lot of stuff.
But here, I think this is like actually like a core disagreement that the working class has with Wall Street, which is all that sounds good, except for two things. At the same time that you added all those products, the cost of those products have been coming down. So the LED screen, like all that stuff, and has fallen to the level where now you can put it in the car.
Most of those things didn't exist when we made the car 20 years ago.
I understand. But the car itself is actually lower quality than it was 10, 20 years ago. Like the car was actually better. It had a longer life cycle. Things lasted longer. There was better quality to that. Like all these components.
I mean, if that were true, people would be we'd be seeing like rich people buy used cars up the wazoo.
Well, they do.
Them around. No, they don't.
They drive. It's like it's a flex to buy a car from the 50s, 60s, 70s.
That's different. That's a showmanship move. And that's the 50s. Nobody's telling 50 cars don't even have air conditioning. Like what fucking car do you want to buy? It doesn't have air conditioning. It's insane.
If it still runs 50 years later or 70 years later.
I mean, yeah, it's cool to have some like drop top 1950s convertible. Like it makes you feel like you got, all the money in the world. But yeah. But like, that's not a better car. It's a cooler car. It's not a better one. But like, inflation, again, going back to like measuring inflation, that is a very complicated thing because you do have inflation in the price of cars. Quality has gone up. So what the government does, they do this really funky thing called chain weighted inflation, and they try to account for the quality improvement in the good. In the same way you've ever seen those like Radio Shack ads from 15 years ago where they have like the page of all the stuff you could buy, and now it's just like one phone. Right? Because you used to have like a radio and a calculator and like a walkie-talkie and a phone, and all of it's now in this like tiny little device in your pocket. So like, has the prices gone up or down because the phone's clearly more expensive than the old phones, right? Old phones maybe $20. Now an iPhone's like $1,000, but that is not the same phone. So they do this weird thing.
But why did Teslas get better and go down in price then?
Because they get better at manufacturing.
Okay.
They get better at manufacturing. Like they get better at that.
So why can't Ford do it?
No, I think they can. I absolutely think they can.
So why are car prices going up?
Because we've regulated the fuck out of them. That's why. And
Tesla has the same regulation.
I get it. Tesla prices are expensive. Teslas are expensive cars. Like the Model Y entry price.
No, you can lease a car now for like $200 a month.
No, you can't. Absolutely not. And you want me to look it up?
Yeah. Model Y monthly lease. No, monthly lease right now.
Well, that's a financing thing. Let's talk about the actual purchase price of the car. Okay. The entry level price for a 2026 Tesla Model Y is $48,000.
That is like a steal for a car that drives itself.
Okay, I'm just saying it's a $48,000 car and it doesn't drive itself well. Like it may be on the highway for 20 minutes. I agree, it's a cool thing to have, but it is not a cheap car. Car prices are very expensive for a variety of reasons. One of them are Democrats. So like, this is not left-right thing, right? What we have done is we have regulated emissions in these cars, and we have required the cars to be materially more efficient in their emission standards, right? In terms of like miles per gallon and, CO2.
Well, Tesla's the most efficient.
It is. Well, it is because it's electric, right?
Of course.
But electric cars are more expensive because the battery is really expensive.
What is a Toyota Camry right now?
Like,
you said 40. I actually think it's cheaper than 40, but let's see. Yeah, just generally.
let's see, about $29,000.
Okay.
Which is a Japanese car. But it also doesn't have all the cool electric stuff and drive and all that. So it's like a decent, that used to be.
So call it 30 to 48,000 is the comparison between.
Yes, but like, why have these prices gone up? And it's because we've created rules that have forced the car makers to make more expensive cars, right? Making a fuel efficient engine is more expensive. That's it. It's just like, we have fuel emission standards. We have safety standards now. Now, these are good things in terms of, well, it depends on what you think about green energy. It depends on what you think about safety standards and like libertarianism. But like, car prices are up because we have rules. And so like, the more rules you have, the more expensive it is to make things. Plus consumer preferences change also, right? Like, people were very comfortable in 1980 buying a car without air conditioning. Nobody is buying, maybe that 1950s car.
Agreed.
Nobody is. So car prices have gone up. All of this going back to, I understand we have inflation. I'm not trying to poo-poo it.
Do you believe the CPI number?
Directionally, I couldn't tell. Is 3
but that
right,
sounds like
4
no.
right?
No, but that's no.
It depends on what you mean, but like, what's the accuracy we're focused on?
But like, you see why Besson now is like, I don't believe the data.
No, I'm fine to say like the CPI data might be off by a little bit, but like, what's causing growth in prices? Regulations. And then we pumped a fuck ton of money.
But it's not just off. Like, here's a good example, right? So in December, I think the government metric was like 2.6 or 2.7%,
on
right?
on CPI.
On CPI,
Yeah.
right? The government metric. Trueflation showed over 3. So it was higher.
Sure.
From December to today, we've seen the trueflation, the alternative number, go from over 3% to now under 1.5. So it's crashed 50%.
Yeah. I mean,
during that same time,
we raised rates.
Hold on. But during that same time, the CPI number has gone from 2.6 to 2.8%. So actually the government number has gone up, but the trueflation number has gone down.
I don't know what's in this trueflation. I can make a metric up too and tell you it goes up and down. So like, I don't know what's actually in that number.
But if I just say to you, do you think since December inflation went up or down? You probably would say down.
I would say, yes, definitely down because rates are up. And so you see a slowing in the economy. Absolutely. Borrowing gets more expensive. People stop purchasing. Housing prices, like, you slow the economy down, which is what the Fed's job is to do, is to slow the economy down when it's overheated. And that is working, right? Like, as it's supposed to. I mean, like, this is the job of the Fed chairman, is to slow the economy down when you have inflation. And one of the tools in the toolbox is to raise rates, which we've done. And so absolutely inflation should come down. Which metric, that will vary based on what you're trying to look at, what good you're looking at, but absolutely coming down. Now, like, why did we have it in the first place? Because we pumped a crap ton of COVID money into the economy. We borrowed a lot and we spent a lot.
Both parties.
Both parties.
Yeah,
both parties do this. Yeah. And that is a real problem. But like, this idea that like the numbers are made up is just flat out incorrect. The people making the numbers up are the ones going on public, television, just literally lying about where job growth comes from. I mean, that is an insane thing.
Do both sides lie?
Oh, of course. I think the Dems lie without knowing. Like,
no, come on.
I think they say things. I think they believe. I mean, I know a lot of like liberal Dems, and like they believe this shit.
I know you can't offend your friends, but come on. If they go on and they mislead on purpose. Here's my test. Ready? This is my test. If you go in and the Democrats are in the White House and you listen to the press secretary, there's obvious that like during the Biden administration, like Peter Doocy would ask something and the woman would say all kinds of crazy shit. People are like, that's insane. And then the same thing happens when you reverse the roles, right? And now all of a sudden you've got the Republicans in office and the press secretaries ask some question and they'll kind of twist the data.
Yeah, we should call them all on their bullshit.
All right. Absolutely. So as long as we're clear, it's just like, I think a huge piece of it is like whoever's in power, their critics get really loud about like, they're lying. But it's like both sides do.
Well, the extent of the lying today, because lying is not binary, it's a spectrum, is like materially worse than Biden. Biden wasn't good either. Like, I mean, it's really.
But did he tell the biggest lie?
The thing that's really hard, oh my God. The thing that's really hard is like, it's hard to be like, that guy's bad, but this guy's worse, because the minute you start criticizing them, they're like, but Biden. I'm like, I know, I agree. He wasn't great either. And so it's hard to be like, everybody sucks.
The podcast is now called The Independents.
Yeah, I think it should be called Everybody Sucks. And like, can we put smart people back in charge? Grow the pie. I have this vision in my head, which I'm never going to do, which is like to start a third political party that is called the Grow the Pie Party. And the only thing we have opinions on are ways to grow the pie, because that is the single best thing for Americans, whether they realize it or not. And like, eventually that works, but I don't know. No one's going to vote for me. Anywho, just to inflation, like the natural course of Fed raising rates and the slowdown that higher borrow rates essentially will bring inflation down. And we were well on our way. We were well on our way to inflation coming down until, this insanity over the last few weeks. So let's just go back to, because I want to talk about tariffs for 2 seconds, because I just think like,
Are they deflationary?
it depends on how big of a tariff.
Okay. All right.
It
There we go.
depends on,
Making
like,
progress.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, deflation is like we don't want deflationary things
Agreed.
in America. That's
Yeah,
a
we
bad
want
thing.
moderation. We don't want inflation, like high inflation, and we don't want deflation either.
You want
But
GDP, it's very simple. It's very simple. You want real GDP growth
3%.
to be 2 to 3%. And for folks who don't necessarily understand this, you want GDP growth above inflation.
Yep.
Right? Like if you can grow GDP faster than inflation, you're doing really, really well, because your pie is net growing. People have more money. You can tax that base a little bit better, and then you can redistribute it. Like growth over inflation is the winner. We had that for like 20 years. Things were growing. We had this little really horrible blip where inflation outpaced growth. And now we've got this two-pronged like attack we have to work on, which is really hard, which is you have to bring inflation down, which typically means slower growth because you have higher rates, but you also want to keep growth, right? And the best way to keep growth, as we've talked about, is deregulating the economy. And so anyway, this is like, I think we've identified the proper problems, right? Like growth isn't as fast as it should be, and inflation was high. We were knocking out the inflation one through higher rates, and we looked at this growth thing and we did all the wrong things. We've got the problem right, and we got the solutions absolutely wrong. And we can talk about why tariffs don't work if you want to go there, but like the problem isn't that America growth is exceptional. It's that the solution, the medicine we're giving it is just like kicking it in the nuts. And like, it was a terrible idea. Okay. Why hold on,
before we get to it,
I have an example I'm going to bring you.
Yeah, I know. Trust me, I know you were studying for this.
I like wrote it down. Too.
I know you were studying for this because you know that I'm right. But all right, so do we agree that American consumerism, we're like the best in the world at doing that, and we are not good at producing things in the sense of shoes, t-shirts, like all like the disposable, type stuff? Is that like a general agreement? And then flip side, let's go to the other extreme. China's really, really good at the production side, and they're really bad at the consumption side. Okay. Is that like a framework that you subscribe to or no?
No. Okay. Because production of goods is not created equal. Making $5 t-shirts are not good jobs. They're not good jobs. Nobody wants to work in a sweatshop. Like nobody wants to go like sit in a factory for 18 hours assembling iPhones. Americans don't, I should say. Like that's what I mean by nobody.
But do you think? But here's my.
We are very, to be clear, America. And there's another thing I wrote down because I'm like, he's going to tell me we don't manufacture shit, and he's wrong.
We definitely manufacture.
We manufacture lots of shit. Now we manufacture.
Are you going to pull up my tweet from yesterday where I said what we manufacture?
America is a manufacturing powerhouse in design. Right? In the like white collar work, which is like the hardest stuff to do. We are pretty good at manufacturing complex goods.
Yep.
And what we've decided,
airplanes, weaponry, homes, all that kind of.
Absolutely. And manufacturing of higher priced goods and more complex goods means those companies are more profitable and therefore they can pay their workers more.
Yep.
You as America do not want to manufacture hats and underwear and t-shirts. Those are not good jobs. And what we realized is it's actually better to like let the people in Vietnam and the Philippines and in China and other places, Mexico, who are developing nations and want those jobs to do the like low margin apparel. Apparel is probably like the best example of this, and let us focus our time on the more complex goods that are more profitable and therefore are better for Americans in the long run. So it's not that we don't manufacture. We manufacture plenty. We're the second largest manufacturer in the world. Second largest, behind China. Like we manufacture lots of complicated stuff. Tesla makes cars here. We make rockets here. We make Apple, all of Apple's design. Remember, it's in the fucking label, designed in California, right? Like we do this stuff. What we've done is we've just taken the like lower quality, lower paying stuff and we've moved it offshore. And that is a good thing because it takes the prices of those goods down. And it means that Americans who are struggling with income can afford better stuff. Like we are really good. I don't think there's like a thing as like good consumer. I think Americans have a luxury of having many of their core items, except for housing and healthcare, to be pretty cheap. Like it's pretty cheap to live in America if you want to buy apparel and you want to buy some groceries. Like I'm not saying it's free, but it is cheaper than it used to be, and the quality is up. And that's because we've allowed
I think the quality of life from a cost perspective has actually declined significantly over the last 15 years.
Purchasing power is up, which is the right way to measure it. But again, why isn't purchasing power up even further? Housing. Housing. It's 50% of your budget. It's 50% of your budget. It's like saying I have this $100 and that $3 thing is the real problem. No, that's not the problem. It's the thing that's the bulk of what most Americans who aren't rich spend their money on. Housing is the biggest line item in every.
But hold on. When you say purchasing power, you mean like the actual purchasing power of the US dollar in your pocket?
The amount of goods you can get for $1. The amount of things you can get for your dollar is not $1, obviously, but like the amount of stuff you can get has gone up.
In what time period?
Over the last 30 years, because what we've done, absolutely.
No, the dollar's been devalued by 26% over the last 5 years.
The dollar's the strongest it's ever been. And
that's a relative comparison, but that's not against goods.
You measure currency relative to other currencies.
No, you don't.
Okay. Yes. Like, how in the world am I going to get a $4 hat 30 years ago? Like, this stuff didn't exist.
Of course it did. No. Hold on a second. You used to be able to buy 30 chocolate bars in 1913 for $1. Today, you can't even buy one chocolate bar for that same dollar.
Okay, $1913.
Okay, so hold on
inflation adjusted is probably what, $3-4 now, $5 now. Like, that's not a comparison. It's like apples and oranges.
No, inflation adjusted. You're talking that the purchasing power of the dollar went down.
The average American whose house got bigger, whose diet got bigger, like we do so much more stuff. We buy so much more stuff. Buys less than in 1913. No, absolutely not.
No. Hold on a second. But inflation adjusted is literally the equivalent of losing purchasing power. You're trying to normalize it. But if $1, if my purchasing power went up at any point over, let's say, a 5-year or 10-year period, at any point in American history, if my purchasing power went up, I should be able to buy more goods and services for the same dollar. You can't do that.
Yes, you can. And yes, absolutely you can. Now, there are some goods that you can't because those goods are regulated. Housing, education, healthcare, right?
Food.
Food. Do you know how expensive a fucking avocado was in 1970? You could barely get an avocado because we couldn't get them out of Mexico. Like, this stuff wasn't available. People go back to this fantasy land of like 1970 abundance. It was not true. But it's not true.
But this is the whole thing is like, you're talking about avocados. I'm talking about just simple everyday basics, a loaf of bread.
I can get a cashmere sweater from Quince coming from Asia. I don't know if it's Vietnam or whatever for $60.
Okay.
$60 for a cashmere sweater. That is an ultra luxury good in 1970, 1980s, probably hundreds of.
But it was less than $60.
No way. Cashmere, real cashmere? Absolutely not.
Of course it was less than $60.
No, this is the kind of stuff you had to have millions of dollars to buy. Like, this stuff is available. Here's my favorite example. Do you know what phone Jeff Bezos has? Your phone.
Today's episode is brought to you by Reed Smith. The practice of law has the power to drive progress, to move businesses forward and support them in achieving their goals. By seizing opportunities and overcoming obstacles, Reed Smith is focused on outcomes. I personally use them as my law firm, and I think that they are fantastic. They know that your time is valuable and that your matters are important. Their deep industry knowledge, longstanding relationships, and collaborative structure make them the go-to partner for complex disputes, transactions, and regulatory matters. Reed Smith delivers purposeful, highly engaged client service that drives progress for your business. Go to reedsmith.com to learn more about the best lawyers in the game. reedsmith.com. Go check them out today.
The billionaires in our economy mostly have the same stuff we have. Like flat screen TVs. Do you remember televisions in the 1970s? They're like 4 feet deep. They're black and white. You go up and change the channel. You can buy a like 85-inch flat screen, plug it in. It's got Wi-Fi and streaming. It's like $150.
No. But you're talking about the quality of the good. What I'm saying is the purchasing power of the dollar has absolutely been decimated.
I can buy more stuff with my dollar. Absolutely, I can buy more stuff with my dollar. Prices have come down on most goods. Not every good, but on most goods, on day-to-day goods, they've come down. And they've come down because few things. One is we've moved the manufacturing of these things to lower cost centers, right? We've moved them to Vietnam, to Philippines, sometimes to China, sometimes it's not. Plus, those people got really good at making them and they make them at scale, right? So prices of those goods come down. It's just like, none of these things are true. Like, you can buy more stuff. Now, again, it's not every good. You can't look at this stuff as like, goods. It depends on which good. But you remember seeing the cost of goods? There's that chart that everyone likes to show with like healthcare goes up like this and everything else comes down. Almost all that stuff coming down is because of globalization.
You got your computer, so now I got my phone. I asked Grok, has the purchasing power of the dollar increased over the last 30 years? No, the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar has not increased over the last 30 years. It has decreased. Inflation has heavily eroded the value, meaning a dollar today buys less than it did in 1995. Based on CPI data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the purchasing power of the dollar has roughly halved. It went down 50% during that period. For example, what cost $1 in 1995 would cost about $2.05 in 2025, reflecting an average annual inflation rate around 2.5% to 3%.
And the U.S. economy grew faster than that. Like, if you took that dollar in 1980, let's say like inflation is like 2%. Roughly, let's call it, from 1980, and you took that dollar and you invested it in the U.S. economy, right? Like even just in stocks, let's call it.
But that's not purchasing power of the dollar.
The growth of your dollar from 1980 to today
went down.
Obviously, if you just stick a fucking dollar under your bed, you're not going to be able to.
That's purchasing power.
Because you take your dollars and you invest them and they grow. This is like people's incomes go up.
But in 1980, only like 30% of Americans.
Dude, the pie grows. Your income goes up. It's not an individual dollar. You get more dollars.
But your wages didn't keep up with the rise of the price of the goods around you.
They absolutely have. And American wages have grown faster than inflation.
But I think everyone agrees, other than maybe you, that your wages keep up with the price of increase of goods.
American wages.
That's why people feel like they're falling behind.
American wages have grown faster than inflation. 2, part of the problem is American wages are they're decreased by rising healthcare costs. You don't see these costs because your employer pays them. So you get, you're kind of like knocked down. Plus the price of goods that you are purchasing, because we've gotten really good at globalization and manufacturing, have come down. You are way better off today than you were in 1980. And that is 100% true.
But hold on.
Plus the quality of the stuff you're buying.
But this, I actually think this is a really important point. It's why I started the conversation with, I think for some portion of people, 100%, they feel better off than they did in 1980. I think for a very, very large portion of the population, they don't feel better off.
Do you remember 1980? Do you remember New York City in 1980? We had a crack epidemic. There were people getting shot on the street. We had 25% of murders in New York, where 20% of global murders were like in New York, or the United States murders were in New York. This was not a nice place to be. Like the US was not better in 1980. Absolutely not. Like maybe the glam shots that we see in the magazines seem good, but this was like America was not amazing. It was not amazing. Stuff was expensive. There wasn't like, you didn't have abundance of all these goods. Houses were smaller. The quality of the goods was lower. Like this is a fantasy that we tell ourselves that 1980 was awesome, and it wasn't. It was not. And it's gotten better and better and better. And yes, some goods in terms of the price of those, we want them to come down, have not come down, but that's because we regulate the fuck out of them. We regulate housing, we regulate healthcare, and we regulate education.
All right, let's talk tariffs.
Okay. I want to go through my
use your example.
Okay. So
you brought a prop.
I brought a prop.
Is that you did not bring a MAGA hat?
I did. I brought a MAGA hat. I figured like, all right, if anyone can like think of, like, well,
is it signed? Is it signed?
It's signed by Donald Trump.
Is this your hat?
Yeah, it's a real hat.
Where did you get this?
It's a collector's item.
Oh, you like bought it?
Yeah, my old co-founder gave it to me as a joke, and I was like, "Oh, this is a cool thing." And
was it like in your office?
Yeah, I keep it in my closet.
Yeah. Oh, in the closet. So like you can't keep it out because your friends come over.
Yeah, no, I just wear it by myself, and I look at myself, and I in the mirror.
You ever heard Andrew Schultz's bit about that's white people's teardrop tattoo? he's like it's the last thing you put on before you go out of your house.
I pull it out in public, and it's like worse than doing like coke on the street. Everyone's like, I don't know about this hat, like.
So explain your hat.
Public drugs is like one light below, wearing Make America Great hats.
No, come on. It is true though. If you see someone walking down the street with it, everyone's just like, damn, that person really don't give a fuck.
I agree with you. It's a flex of like, I don't care. And I'm probably stupid. So I just want to talk about this hat. It's a prop. Fine. Okay. So this hat, I would bet, I don't know the actual price, right? But
with Trump's name on it, is probably
Trump's name is worth a little bit more. Okay. We can buy this hat online because it's made in like Vietnam or whatever for about.
Look at the tag. Is it made in Vietnam or something?
It's a Trump hat. I'm sure he lied about where it's made. I don't even care. It's like made in America, even though it's clearly not. This guy is, he's not telling you the truth. Anyway, even if it were like, let's just pretend, because I have no idea. Let's pretend like this thing is made in Vietnam. It's $5.
Okay.
Right. For us to buy it. And then we come in, right, as an American entrepreneur, as a manufacturing company, you look at this and you go, okay, there's a market for hats. The current market clearing price for said hats is roughly $5, right? The Vietnamese and others are pretty good at making them for $5. Why are they good at making them for $5? A variety of reasons. One, they focused on it, but also their labor costs are lower. And so like the input costs on their side are lower. So they're able to make this thing for $5. And by the way, that is not just like a United States clearing price. That's a global clearing price because they export. And they don't just, maybe this hat, they just export to America. But for others, they might export it to other places. Okay. And then we say, this is what a tariff does. We want to make those hats. It is strategically important, whatever, for the United States to make these hats. And first of all, I just want to start with that thing. The United States government, the same government that you and I just talked about, all its failures, all the reasons it's incompetent, both left and right, is now centrally deciding, central planning, this is communism roughly, that hat manufacturing is important. Step one is government deciding this. Right there, you should walk from tariffs because we've now moved from a market-based economy to a central planned one. That is a disaster. Leaving that aside, what actually happens is the government says, you know what, we have to strategically manufacture these stupid hats. But for America to do it, we can't have that price be $5. It's too low. That is by definition what the American government is saying when they apply a tariff to this hat. Because they're saying in order, just to really clear out, in order for American manufacturing to make this hat, it's got to cost 10.
But I think a key piece to it is, why is it $5 if America can only make it for 10? Sometimes it's
because their labor costs are cheaper.
No, that is one potential thing for sure, is the labor cost.
Yes.
But in other product scenarios, it is because a foreign government is subsidizing the producer.
Yes.
They are manipulating their currency. They could be, there's a whole bunch of like a toolbox of things they could be doing to get the price down to $5. If it's labor, I think that's one example.
I understand.
But if they're subsidizing producers or something, it's a whole different ballgame.
Totally. And I'm gonna leave that one out for a second because that's basically a China argument. And I actually think we'll agree on the China problem, which is China implements tariffs in a different way. Instead of tariffing American goods, which they still do, they subsidize their industry, right, by basically printing money and handing it to in particular, like cars. But the Vietnamese don't do this. And the Filipinos don't do this. And most of the manufacturers, like, this is just not a thing they do. There isn't like government subsidy.
Well, there's a lot of products around the world where they do this. Maybe not in Vietnam. I'm not familiar with it.
It's really China.
But like, but like Canada does this with their lumber. And there's a huge reason why the American lumber producers, who could produce plenty of lumber, could almost produce all the lumber we need in America, they can't compete because the Canadian government is subsidizing the producers, and they're able to flood America with cheap lumber and actually put a strain on the American producers.
And to be clear, we tax that lumber. Right? The Americans tax. No. We've done this for 20 years. Like, we know that the Canadian government is subsidizing lumber and a specific type of it, and we tax it.
And you like that idea?
If we can prove that the Canadian government or any other government is illegally subsidizing an industry, I want to be very crisp about what this means. If they are illegally subsidizing an industry, they're basically pumping a bunch of government money into it, absolutely. That is unfair practice. That is not free market. That is not free trade, and fuck them. Right? And we should be pretty clear that, like, if you illegally subsidize an industry, but that is a high bar. That is essentially printing money to make your local manufacturing cheaper. And that is not what 99% of trade is, right? That is a weird,
what number do you think it is?
I don't know. You have to go 1%. Good by good. 1, 2, like, and yes, it's very specific. Like, you could point to like BYD in China being subsidized by the Chinese government. Like, they do some stuff. But I just want to go back to that.
So I think one big disagreement
because by the way, the government
that you have with the people who are very supportive of tariffs is that I think everything you said up until that point, they agree. If there's subsidizations, currency manipulations, all that stuff, they think the number's way higher than you think it is.
Yes, people are stupid. I understand that. Like, they make, of course they do, because you've been telling them that it's true, even though it's not. Like, yes, they believe the shit that people tell them, even though it's not accurate. We thought for a while that the earth was flat. Like, for hundreds of years.
And now people think that only 1% of goods are subsidized.
People didn't wash their hands before doing surgery. Like, we do a lot of dumb shit as humans. And so, like, it doesn't surprise me people believe things are wrong, but they're wrong. All right. Hat, right? Like, because we're not, remember, like, even I do think we agree that illegal subsidization of industries should not be allowed. But
and you agree with the other thing, the currency manipulations and the other, like, unfair trade practices that are falling under this whole.
If a government is purposely devaluing its currency relative to what it should be, which is really not happening across the board. In fact, China's doing the other thing right now, which is a whole longer conversation.
But in 2018, in response,
they were for a while and then they flipped.
Okay.
If they are devaluing their currency, which allows them to basically have cheaper labor costs to subsidize manufacturing and other stuff, sure. But again, like, these are edge cases, and this is not what Trump is doing. This is not like an educated view of a few key places where we think governments are subsidizing. This is not what is happening.
He did that in 2018. He went surgical. Now he's going blanket.
Yeah, I mean,
fair.
And even
is that a fair way to describe it?
It was, I mean, yes, in the sense that in 2018, the stuff was really targeted. It was like Chinese steel and a few other things. And
washing machine, solar panels.
Yeah, because solar panels are definitely subsidized by the Chinese. Now, we can debate whether that actually makes China better because they're basically selling shit at a loss that we can use to make energy. I'm actually not sure that's a bad thing. Like, yeah, I'll take the Chinese taxpayer money and not have to pay for it and buy cheap solar panels. Like, I'm not sure that's bad, but again, these are like...
From the consumer's perspective, but from a manufacturing perspective...
Why do we want to make solar panels? It's like a low-paying job. Making solar panels is not like a great business. Tiny margin, massive competition. Like, why do we want to make solar panels?
Then why does China do it?
Because they figured if they could make them, they have some industry because everybody else is unemployed. Because they're poor. They're poor.
But that's the exact argument that half the country is making about America, is that they don't have jobs, that they feel poor, that they need manufacturing jobs.
I get it, but you don't want to make solar panels. It's the wrong industry. Those people don't make money. Those industries don't make money. The government has to subsidize it just to have the jobs. They're basically taxing their population to employ a bunch of solar panel workers who make like $4 an hour. That is not good. Nobody wants those jobs. You don't want those jobs. You don't want to make solar panels. You don't want to make hats. You don't want to make apparel. Not cool. Not fun. Like, we want better jobs than that.
But if you know China's doing it and you don't try to level the playing field, aren't you simply allowing for a non-free market to exist?
It's a subsidized market by the Chinese government, which is subsidized by the Chinese people.
Okay.
Taxes and other revenue streams.
So do you subscribe to the idea that if the tariffs were able to get us back to a no tariff world with free trade agreements in place that actually are followed?
100%.
You like that?
Tariffs are not a tool to be kept on. Tariffs are a tool to get more free trade.
Okay, hold on.
If that is the case, I want to go through why. But I want to talk about making this hat, man.
But do you think that I actually think Trump, in a weird way, agrees with what you just said?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't, because he's talking about he's talking about bringing manufacturing back. And if you're,
but I think that's part of the free trade.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Free trade would not bring manufacturing of low cost goods back to America. In fact, it would make the prices of those things cheaper. But we're not getting those jobs back. We already just agreed that the United States can't manufacture this stuff for the prices that clear it in the global market.
I think that we could. Here's my general.
Hold on.
We can manufacture this hat better than the Vietnam can.
No way. Maybe better is the problem. Is the keyword there is better, like quality
wise, plus price.
No, because if we could, we would do it. Like
no.
We would do it. It would happen
if there was free trade, we would do it.
What are you talking about? The Vietnamese have they have
like. Do you think a machine or a person made this?
A combination of the two. It's absolutely free trade. And by the way,
no. Hold on a second. Well, it's not free trade because I think Thailand, and Cambodia are the two that I'm more familiar with. I think that their average tariffs against the U.S. it's some crazy. It's like 20 or 30%.
So it's like 2 to 3%. 2 to 3%. I have all the stats. I will send them to you. The average global tariff of countries where the United States has free trade agreements, which is most of our exporting. Because now we're flipping from importing to exporting, and that's a problem. Okay. So we'll go back to exporting. But on the exports, I'll touch it for 1 second. The average tariff on U.S. exports of our free trade partners is less than 10%. India is a little bit higher. China is...
India is way higher.
It's 13. And there's a bunch of exceptions. Yes, it is. It is. And I pulled all the numbers.
It's 100% on cars.
There are certain strategic industries where they are protectionist. Absolutely. And there is a reason why India is really shitty at making cars globally because of their tariffs. And like, I just want to go through this. Like, India will never be a manufacturing powerhouse in cars if they're tariffing people, because their car companies will not be globally competitive. And this is the problem with tariffs. This hat, I just want to go back to this and run this through. It is $5 for the Vietnamese or whomever to make this today. They do not subsidize it, right? It's not like the Vietnamese government is like pouring a bunch of money into this stuff. Free trade allows them to make this thing for $5 and we want to buy it for $5, right? That is a fact. And the reason that works is because they are a developing nation. Their people do not make as much money. And so a $3 job is better than a $2 job, which is better than unemployment. This is globalization. It brings people up, right? And this is bringing the Vietnamese who...
I don't agree. Globalization.
Their alternatives would be unemployment. Okay? Like, the alternative is unemployment. That is not a good thing. So,
but I think that... you can make a very strong argument that actually globalization has hurt people in Vietnam.
Do you remember what Vietnam was 20 years ago? 30 years ago? This is like 60% unemployment. People are living like it's a farming nation 20, 30 years ago with mass unemployment. It was basically
some people are definitely winning, but just like our country, globalization has definitely helped some and not helped others. For example,
there is no argument that Vietnam is better 30 years ago than they are today. Absolutely not.
No. You're looking at holistic. You would argue that America is better, but what I'm saying is that there's a increasing percentage of the population is not better off. So in America,
no, just flat out wrong. Employment is up, incomes are up, GDP is up. They have major
none of those
now.
But my whole point is that all of those numbers don't actually matter for the on the ground truth.
Absolutely they do. That represents the mass of Vietnamese people. Unemployment.
I'm talking America. You're talking
I'm talking about Vietnam, because I think globalization is really, really good for third world developing nations, and it's good for Americans because we get cheap stuff. We get cheap stuff that are not good paying jobs we want anyway. And I'm going to walk through why the protectionist stuff doesn't work. And Bernie is wrong about this too. $5 clearing price. We're almost there. By definition, when we put a tariff on an imported Vietnamese good, the hat, we are saying, if the goal of that tariff, this is the point, if the goal of that tariff is to revitalize American manufacturing, which is never going to work, what we are effectively saying is American companies cannot compete at that $5 price point because otherwise you don't need a tariff.
Unless there is unfair trade practice.
And there's no unfair hat trade practice, let me tell you. But like, and this is the vast majority of industries. And again, we're not going to talk about the weird edge cases. We're going to talk about the majority of the stuff. So what
there's a high percentage chance that the hat manufacturer in Vietnam really is via China and they're just using it to evade tariffs.
Cool. We get real cheap hats. Like this is a great thing.
But that would be by definition unfair trade practice.
Sure. If the Chinese are like throwing a bunch of hidden money into this, like, and you could prove that and we care, like absolutely.
Well, it's well known that they definitely are using Vietnam, Cambodia.
Not for hats. Chinese don't want to make hats.
No, I'm not saying specific, but just like they definitely are trying to get around. And from what I understand, the reason why they tariffed every single country in the world is to prevent them from being able to circumvent those tariffs.
I mean, like, I don't know why we think Chinese giving us cheap shit that they subsidize is a bad thing, but like we can go have that argument.
If it puts our manufacturers out of business,
we don't want to make this stuff. And here's like the point.
Do you think that people in middle of America would make that hat if they could make the numbers work?
You can't make the numbers work. It's fantasy. It's like saying, would you like to fly if you could? Absolutely. I would love to have a jetpack on my back, but I can't do that. It's not reality.
They make those in America.
Hat. Fuck, I'm like so close. All right. We're saying this hat cannot be successfully manufactured by the United States for $5. The government is deciding this is important, which is a disaster in the first place. And then we say, all right, for us to manufacture this thing, it's got to be 10, right? That's essential. Okay. So we're going to slap 100% tariff on these guys. So now we have 10. Okay. So then the next thing that's supposed to happen, if we go like one by one, is now an American company. And I think this like sequence is important. Goes, oh, interesting. Hat prices are 10. They are no longer 5. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start making hats for 9. It's not going to make them for 5 because if I could make them for 5, I already would have done it. I'm going to make them for 9 because there's your spread right there. That $5, whatever, 100% tariff or something like that, that has created this fake opportunity for this American company. And so the American company decides to raise a bunch of money and invest it to make $9 hats. Now, here is the problem with that.
Are you looking for a simple way to earn Bitcoin rewards every single day? At Simple Mining, we help people mine Bitcoin, even if you're brand new. We're a vertically integrated Bitcoin mining company based in Cedar Falls, Iowa, offering a premium white glove hosting service that helps you maximize your mining profitability. With over 500 clients worldwide, we manage over 15,000 machines across our sites. Our facilities are staffed 7 days a week, and we fix most on-site issues in under 48 hours. In fact, we can repair more than 2,000 hash boards each month in our dedicated repair center, ensuring your miners run smoothly. Want to see it firsthand? Tour our mining sites, either in person or online, anytime. Plus, for your first year of mining, we cover all repairs, no questions asked. We bill you for the exact time your miners are running, and you can pause whenever you want. Need to buy or sell? Our exclusive miner marketplace gives you the freedom to trade on your schedule. You'll even have a custom dashboard to track your miner stats in real time, and if you're thinking about running your operation like a business, our tax team can guide you through the depreciation advantages. Ready to grow your Bitcoin stack? Visit simplemining.io.
First of all, the government has decided with that tariff that this is important to America. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but now we have central planning. 2, hats are $10. We have just raised the price for every single person in America. We have taxed 350 million Americans just to get the price up for this weird semi-opportunity for a US company to make $9 hats. 3, even if this works and you get, by the way, it's like the lead time on this shit's gonna be like 4 or 5 years, you have a company making $9 hats. And by definition, $9 hats are no longer globally competitive. We cannot export. We cannot export. We have created a single market, which is a domestic protected market by the American taxpayer. The American taxpayer is paying so that we, hat company, can employ whatever, a few hundred people and make more expensive hats. Everything I just said is true. That is how this stuff works. And then, by the way, this is the worst part. Even after that American company comes in and maybe 5 years from now successfully makes $9 hats, which, by the way, you cannot export. So you're only selling them to Americans. We're a big country, so maybe that's not that bad. The minute that tariff goes away, that company goes bankrupt. It is not globally competitive. These are shaky jobs. These are not good companies. You do not want to work here. You do not want to start those companies because you switch administrations and all of a sudden they're not protectionist anymore. The tariff comes off, the company goes away, the jobs go away. They're not, this is not market forces, and this is why it doesn't work. Plus, everybody pays more.
But we did switch administrations and they left the tariffs on.
They left some tariffs on strategically.
And doubled some.
Yeah, like Chinese steel because they're flooding the market with like cheap steel.
You sound like a Republican.
Yeah, no, like, I mean, we can go back to like
solar panels, steel.
Dude, cheap solar panels are good. That's a good thing. Like, I get that people are like uncomfortable that like the Chinese are making all the solar panels, but like solar panels are not good business. Like, have you seen the price of solar panels over the last 20 years? It's cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. The margins are coming down. And by the way, here's what's happening. It's not just the Chinese anymore. Other Asian countries are figuring out how to manufacture solar panels. And so those solar panels are getting cheaper because there's more global supply, which is another good thing for America. So like, why do we want to manufacture solar panels? Why is that a good thing?
Well, I think that a huge piece of it is, let's start with, there's a national security concern. Solar panels is one piece, but there's a ton of these different products, pharmaceuticals, different defense products, all kinds of stuff.
Sure. If you think like we need to make our own bullets, I agree with you.
Okay. So bullets, also energy production.
We have domestic energy.
We have domestic energy, but if we want solar panels, pretty important, then
you want more expensive solar panels.
No, not necessarily.
Absolutely necessary. You are explicitly saying the United States cannot manufacture solar panels at the market clearing price. And that is why you're adding a tariff. By definition, by saying you need a tariff to manufacture panels here, you are saying the US cannot do it at the current market clearing price, which means the prices will go up.
Because what you're saying is that if there was true free trade, they couldn't make it as cheap as they could make it right now.
I get it. Again, in this edge case of government subsidizing a specific industry, and solar panels is actually a pretty good one because the Chinese definitely do subsidize it. Like they absolutely do. Right now, we are talking, I want to be really crisp. We are talking about, I gotta put this hat away. We are talking about.
You should put it on your head.
It looks really stupid. I'm like uncomfortable. I can hold it, but I can't.
No, but like if you put it on, then people
put it on my,
that'll be the headline.
I don't want a photo of this on my head.
Zach.
Yeah, like this is embarrassing. It's worse than like a nude photo. Like we are basically saying that we don't want China to make super cheap solar panels because they're subsidizing them. Again, this is like 1% of goods, right? We're talking about the edge case of the edge case. We're not talking about Trump.
But go ahead.
We're not talking about anything what Trump is doing. So like, sure, strategic because they're subsidizing.
No, but here's
this is not what they're doing. Hold on. Cheaper solar panels. Would you rather, as an American, not a rich American like us, but an average American?
Speak for yourself.
Dude, you're wearing like a $4,000 suit. Like you're not poor, and I'm definitely not poor. So let's call a spade a spade here. Do you think Americans would prefer that we have 20,000 solar panel manufacturing jobs in the middle of, I don't know where we would make them, Texas, Idaho, Kansas, wherever, someplace, where we would manufacture things. We get maybe like 20,000, 30,000 jobs. But every American now pays materially more for solar panels, which means they pay more for electricity. Whether you believe in solar panels is a different story, but like that is essentially the argument. You're saying we as Americans should pay more for solar panels because we want to make them.
But I reject the premise that we couldn't make it cheaper.
If we could make it cheaper today, we would do it.
If there was free trade, we probably could.
Because the price would be higher.
No.
Because the price would be higher. No, yes, you're arguing for subsidization by the Chinese government. And what is the outcome of subsidization?
No, if there was free, if there was free trade,
what does that mean?
If they didn't subsidize, they didn't manipulate the currency, they didn't do anything to give their producers an advantage.
If they didn't subsidize, let's do this one by one. If the Chinese didn't subsidize solar panels, what would happen to the price of Chinese manufactured solar panels?
Well, the price of their solar panels would go up.
Correct.
But then
which is we import.
But then we would have the ability to make them in America, and that competition would drive the price down, which is exactly what happened in steel, washer machines, and solar panels in 2018.
No, we would make the more expensive solar panels.
So then why in 2018 we put tariffs on those three products? All three products went down in price over the next 18 months.
Because we have global economy. China's not the only place that makes steel.
No, but the U.S. began producing more of those three products. I'll give you two examples.
Yes, we pay more.
I laid the trap. He walked right into it.
We pay more. Sorry.
Hold on. No. We didn't pay more. We didn't pay more. Hold on. Let me give you a concrete example.
Absolutely, you pay more by definition.
No. Let me explain. With steel, in 2018, we put tariffs on steel imported to the United States.
From which countries? I believe it was China. And there was a subsidization coming from Canada,
but
which, by the way, makes steel prices from those countries more expensive.
Okay. And so guess what happened is that certain companies came to the United States, took over old factories that we had. They began production. But a stated goal of the steel tariffs was that we are under 80% capacity utilization with our steel producers. We want to get to over 80%. That's exactly what happened. Steel production in the United States went to over 80% capacity utilization. And the price of steel for the first 3 to 6 months went up. And then it fell, and by the end of 2019, it was lower than the pre-tariff price.
No, because if that were true, we would remove the tariffs and export.
Hold on a second. Just wait till you get to the end of it.
It's simply not true.
No, it is true. I'll show you the data. The second thing is washer machines. Same thing. The United States did not make washer machines. There was South Korean companies that were the big makers of the washer machines. We put tariffs on. Guess what the 2 South Korean manufacturers did? They came to the United States. They set up plants. They created 2,000 American jobs, and the price of washer machines fell. And by the end of 2019, was cheaper than they were pre-tariff. On top of that,
just know, I know you're saying it, but by definition, the price goes up. It goes up. And then it's protectionist. There is no reason to drop that price because you have a market that the government has created. There's just no way. I mean, I get that maybe we're importing them from other countries now, absolutely. Or if you create additional supply, absolutely. Right? But globally supply. But the definition of a tariff is that the United States can't make it cheap enough. And so therefore we need to raise the price of it.
No, but I'm saying that you don't understand how tariffs work.
I know exactly how tariffs work. You are literally taxing the good. That is what it is. It is a tax on the good.
So that's the price of solar panels.
Yes, solar panels have gone down drastically because the Chinese have subsidized them.
No. But even though we tariffed them 50%, they still went down.
That's the global price, first of all. And the Chinese subsidize the shit out of these things.
Okay.
Right? Why do you think the price goes down? Because the Chinese subsidize it.
Do you see this right here? This is washing machines. You see when the tariffs are put in place, it spikes. Agreed, right? There's a change in price. Look what happened then. Then the price went down. And before the pandemic, it actually was lower than the price before because we increased the domestic manufacturing
at higher prices.
No, the price ended up lower than pre-tariff. Hold on. No. And then here's the steel price. Same thing happened here.
Yes, commodities boom bust, my friend. Commodities boom bust. When the United States economy, every single product that we tariffed in 2018 by the end of 2019 was cheaper than before the tariff. Oh my God, no. How much do you want to bet? How much do you want to bet? And by the way,
I just showed you the charts.
First of all, you showed me some chart that I'm sure is made up and has weird data behind it. Also, when the
US is not right.
Sorry, I'm sure the data you looked at was probably coming from Newsmax. But when the U.S. economy shrinks, right? First of all, commodity cycles are driven by supply and demand adjustments in the market,
Agreed.
Right? And commodity cycles boom bust regardless of U.S. manufacturing.
Agreed.
They really boom bust based on demand. Supply and obviously do we overproduce? So demand goes up, we overproduce.
But demand for American-made steel goes up when you put tariffs
at higher prices. Yes, of course it does. At higher prices, you've created an artificial market. By making them more expensive.
Because
otherwise, you just buy them from China.
If you increase demand, but also the domestic manufacturing goes up,
it does. It goes up at higher prices.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. Otherwise, you don't need the tariff.
No, that's not true. This is the point, though, is that you still can have domestic manufacturing go up and do it at a cheaper price than what was previously being done.
No,
it's a capacity component.
No.
If somebody is coming into the market and they're selling subsidized products into your market, right?
We're not talking about subsidized products. I agree. If you have subsidization,
all of these products are subsidized. That's the whole argument.
Solar panels and yes, by China in a specific case. Absolutely.
But I think that the argument, and again, I'm not trying to defend the administration in this, right? I just think, I really do think the tariffs are a good policy. I don't agree with the severity at which they're doing. Maybe they're kind of doing some judo negotiating with 100% tariff on China that's going to end up low or whatever. But let me actually do this. Here's what I think we should end up at. I think that we should end up with 5 to 10% blanket tariff on all imports to the United States. And rather than use tariffs as a punitive program, we should then use it as an incentive program and make a list of all the things that we want for other countries to make for us, and then remove or significantly decrease the tariff on those products to incentivize them to come to the United States. So what that in effect would do is say, hey, if you want to access the US market and we don't desperately
I get
your
it.
product,
you want Americans to pay more for stuff. I understand that is what your goal is.
But they wouldn't pay more.
They absolutely will pay more.
Because the other flip side of this is, do you agree that Americans would be better off if they got a huge tax cut plus the tariffs? On a net basis, would they be better off?
Well, which Americans? Because if you
anyone making under $150,000 a year.
Okay, so
if they remove the federal income tax for
people
anyone
making under $150,000 barely pay taxes anyway. They barely pay taxes. People making under $50,000 basically don't pay taxes.
Well,
right?
a lot of them pay up to 30%.
I mean, when you get in the hundreds, but the vast majority of Americans make under 50 grand pay like no tax.
47% is Mitt Romney's number. That was the number
poorest Americans, probably rightfully so, basically pay no taxes. So tax cuts don't fucking help them. They don't help them at all, right? So like you're going to be worse off because tax cuts.
80% of Americans make less than $150,000.
Great. I mean, I'll take the tax cuts to make me richer, but like for the person who makes 80 grand, those tax cuts are not helpful, minor. Plus, the tariff is a tax increase. The tariff is a tax increase because they're now paying more.
But on a net basis, I disagree with that, but let's just say that it is a tariff, is a tax increase. If they also get all federal income tax removed, are they better off?
No, because you're paying more for goods and the tax savings isn't enough. Absolutely not.
Why would you be paying more for goods?
Because the tariff makes them more expensive by definition. No, the point of a tariff is to make the product more expensive.
Is to make the imported product more expensive.
Yes.
But not the domestically made product.
We cannot make this shit.
I looked it up. There's a bunch of hat companies that have been around since the 1800s in America. They're doing just fine.
Absolutely. How much do you think those hats cost?
Well, they make ball caps. What do you think that the end retailer sells the American-made hats?
Americans can make more expensive luxury goods, and there is a market for more expensive luxury goods, and that is absolutely true. But cheap stuff, by definition, we're not making. So if we could make it, you wouldn't need the tariff.
So do you think that the quality of the product actually makes it cheaper? If you have to buy 3 of the hats over the next 3 years because they keep wearing out, is that actually a cheaper product?
Americans can decide for themselves whether they think something is high quality or low quality. It's not my job. It's not the government's job. Let the market decide. I don't know. If that hat sucks, no one will buy it. And some other company will show up and make a hat that works. This is how economics work. Let the market decide which hat is worth the price.
But the market isn't deciding right now.
Absolutely, it's deciding.
It's because the currencies are being manipulated. The products are being subsidized. There's tariffs on the other side. Here, how about this?
I mean, I appreciate that you think Americans get stuff too cheap and we should pay more for this stuff so that we can have low paying.
But the price of the products goes down over time.
Because the globalization allows other countries with lower input costs to make cheaper stuff and make it at scale.
Who can make it cheaper than China?
Vietnam, India, Philippines. I mean, at this point, by the way, China is not always the low-cost manufacturer anymore.
But this is my point. So if that's how economics works, why aren't they already making it?
What do you mean they're already making it?
If they can make it cheaper than China can, why don't they make it before the tariffs?
Vietnam does make this.
I don't know, some stuff. But like if you put a tariff on China and say, hey, you can't bring subsidized steel into America, then why is somebody not making it cheaper than the price of China?
They are.
Okay. So
but
then
we just have.
So why is it that another country can make it cheaper than China who has to subsidize their steel industry?
No, they can make it cheaper than the tariff to China.
Okay. But
they can make it cheap. Yes. If the Chinese flood low cost steel into the market, which, by the way, is an input cost to construction and manufacturing. So there's another argument of like, you want cheaper housing? Cheaper steel is a good thing. But yes.
Well, unless the trade-off is that you put your own steel manufacturers out of business.
I don't know. Like, do we really think that we have to make steel here?
I mean, don't you think it's a national security concern?
I don't know. Maybe.
How are we going to build things?
We're going to buy steel from cheaper people and make the stuff cheaper.
But
are you planning to go to war? Are you planning to go to war with all of our trade partners? Is the United States plan to go to war with Mexico and Canada and Europe and like Southeast Asia, except for China? It's not like steel is only manufactured in China. People are like, this is the other thing that's going on. Everyone's like, it's China. Like, guys, there's more countries out there than China that make stuff.
I know, and they all have tariffs now.
Yes, I know. And now we're going to pay more for all the stuff that they make. I understand that. But yes, like
unless the American producers start to produce it.
At higher prices.
No, at lower prices.
They can't do it at lower prices. If they could do it at lower prices, they would already do it. They would already do it.
No. Lower price. Excuse me. Lower prices meaning that if there was a free market, let's just use easy examples. Let's say steel was $1, right? And the Chinese subsidize it.
The clearing price of steel, because that price obviously moves.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Just right now, steel, it's $1.
The clearing price, fine. Current clearing price of steel.
China subsidized it by 25%. It's now 75 cents.
For the Chinese steel.
For the Chinese steel.
Correct.
In America, we say, well, we can only make it for $1. There's a 75 cents. We can't compete. Mm-hmm. So we go and we say, okay, we're going to put a 25% tariff on China. Yes. Now it's $1. Do you think that people would make steel in America? Of course. If we go and we say we're actually going to put a 50-cent tariff, now Chinese steel is $1.25 and we can make it for $1.
The Chinese, they don't make all the steel. They don't make all the steel.
Well, they make a lot of it.
No, they don't. Like they really don't. And like,
how much steel do they make? Look it up.
I mean, like Okay. Chinese steel manufacturing as a percentage of global steel. How about that?
Perfect. That's a good question. We should have a referee for the questions.
Yeah. They also import a shit ton of stuff because it's basically like a manufacturing. They make like houses professionally. They import concrete. They import like all copper. Okay. They make 50% of global crude steel production.
Okay, that's a big number.
Because they use it domestically to build buildings that nobody lives in.
No. But there's a lot of caveats. But you said they don't make that much, and it's 50%.
No, I'm just saying there are other steel producers. By the way,
how much does America make?
Not a huge percentage because we want cheap steel. Like, why do you want to pay more for steel?
No. But this is the trade-off: is it worth buying the subsidized steel if it is putting your own manufacturing capabilities out of work? Today's episode is brought to you by Bitcoin OS. They're the ultimate upgrade to Bitcoin. Bitcoiners can now experience the magic of the entire crypto world, including DeFi, scalability, privacy, and more, without giving up control of their hard-earned sats. Powered by revolutionary zero-knowledge technology, Bitcoin OS lets other blockchains plug into Bitcoin, offering their services to the world's largest digital asset. This lets Bitcoin holders securely move their coins across the crypto landscape, turning Bitcoin into a productive, programmable asset. Putting your Bitcoin to work once meant trusting centralized companies and bridges to protect your assets, a model that's lost crypto owners billions to hacks and fraud. Bitcoin OS lets you be your own boss, using a system based on cryptography rather than trust, the way Satoshi intended. Using Bitcoin OS, altcoins are returning home, eager to plug into Bitcoin security, network effects, and $2 trillion capital base. Bitcoin is the first and final boss of all digital assets, and will soon be reborn as the foundation of a united crypto world. Follow Bitcoin OS on Twitter at BTC_OS and be early to Bitcoin again. Follow Bitcoin OS on Twitter today at BTC_OS.
This is the question. Do you, as a nation of 350 million people who buy houses and cars and consumer electronics and groceries, do you want 350 million Americans to pay more for steel or cars or avocados so that we can employ 30,000 steelworkers in an economy in the United States? By the way, those aren't like particularly great paying jobs. In an economy in the United States that has 4% unemployment, has income rising faster than every single other country in the world. We are taxing 350 million Americans because steel is an input to almost everything Americans buy, right? Like, so nobody goes to the store and buys steel. They buy a house, you buy goods, and the steel is an input cost. So we are saying, we don't like this cheap steel. So all 350 million of you're going to pay more. But guess what? There's an Instagram post of 30,000 people in Pittsburgh who are making steel. Be happy for them. It is a wealth transfer from 350 million Americans to 30,000 steel employees.
So
it is
funny you say
government cronyism at its best. It is the United States government deciding where money in the economy should go. And it is picking winners and losers. And the losers are the American consumer, and the winners are a few random manufacturing companies of a few random goods that the United States government, run by a bunch of idiots, have decided are important to us. That is tariffs. It is the United States government deciding that you should pay more because we need 30,000 jobs.
Well, we do. But by the way, we do this for pretty much every single industry that we think is important.
The United States government does not pick the industries that the United States thinks are important.
Of
Absolutely
course it does.
not.
It literally has nationally strategic important industries. They put a label on it. It's an actual government label they put on it. This is of national.
Sorry, I want to be clear. The success of American companies and American exceptionalism is because the United States government has decided that we're good at it.
Well, here's a good example. So there's a business that I know. They manufacture highway signs and they put traffic cones.
Sure.
And they get government contracts. The U.S. government requires that they use American-made products.
Yes, I get it. The United States government is an inefficient beast that is going to pay more for those signs and those traffic cones, which is why a manufacturing construction from the federal government is so fucking expensive, because we make the United States government and all of our subcontractors use American labor. And that is why a bullet train in California costs $800 billion and the Chinese can do it for $1 billion, because we are shooting ourselves in the dick. Like, yes, we are absolutely requiring the US. This is a Biden problem, by the way. This is what you just described as this is the issue with all the Biden stuff, which is like, it's American version of subsidizing industries. It's the same thing you're bitching about the Chinese doing. It's the same exact thing. We are taking US taxpayer money. The United States government does not have money. We do not have money. The United States government takes money from you and from me through taxes. It's not like the government has bank account, like every year they collect and they spend. Okay. So when the federal government spends money, or any of your local government as well, right? On traffic cones, what was the other one? They make like fucking metal signs or whatever. They are spending your money. It's not the government money. There is no thing as government money, your money. And they have said, okay, we are only going to buy manufactured goods in America. And so we are going to pay more. They explicitly are paying more. There is articles and books and data up the wazoo about the cost of American infrastructure being so goddamn expensive. And the reason for this, including rules and regulations, one of the major reasons, and it's in this new abundance book, which is great, is we have Buy American rules. And we are buying from non-competitive, high-priced domestic manufacturers. And I get it. They have a few jobs. Your buddy's company, congrats for him. He is leeching off the American taxpayer. I mean, by definition, he is leeching off the American taxpayer because we have decided to favor his company over globally competitive prices. And if
to be clear, he's forced to buy the American-made traffic cones and stuff.
No, I get it.
To win the contract.
To win the contract, and then he charges the American government even more. It's passed through to the taxpayer. Absolutely, he's not losing money. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in business. So like we pay for this subsidy, and we pay for higher prices in all of these things. And like, if the argument is we should be happy about that, okay, fine. Like if that's the argument, then let's just be honest with the American people that we think we should tax you in higher prices to subsidize a few industries that Donald Trump has decided are important. Because that's what we're doing by definition. And like, okay, I guess, but like, remember we went back, and I think steel is such a fascinating one because we went back to the beginning of this, which is we said Americans feel poor, right? They feel poor. And one of the reasons they feel poor is housing. Probably the biggest reason, in my opinion. People are maybe believe differently, but housing prices are insane. What is one of the largest input costs to building a house? Steel.
Okay.
Copper, right? Like these are input costs to houses. And what we are saying is all of you are going to pay more for housing now because we don't like cheap steel coming from elsewhere. That is what we are saying by definition. The cheap steel, it's too cheap. It's too cheap. Like, and so all of you Americans are about to pay more for new construction in America so that a steel mill in Pittsburgh probably can employ probably less than 20,000 people.
Which then go out into their community and spend money, which create more jobs, which create tax revenue, which drives better outcomes.
It's a government job. We just created essentially the government job.
No, stop.
Yes, we did. We took money from the American people through a tariff.
You've completed the whole circle. You've perfected the like Twitter troll argument.
We have taken money from the American consumer because the United States government collects that tariff. So we taxed you, and we handed the money to the steelworkers.
Unless we took the tariff from the supplier.
Which is passed through to you in higher prices.
Not necessarily.
Absolutely.
Walmart has already gone to their suppliers, said that they're not going to increase their prices.
Walmart also just pulled guidance today because they said the economy is so soft they can't guide to growth.
Okay, but that has nothing to do with what their price strategy is with the tariffs.
Absolutely it does, because they know they're going to have to raise prices, and so they can't predict demand on the higher prices, and that's why they pull guidance.
Maybe. Assumption.
Read it in their press release. They are specifically saying we think consumer demand is going to come down. We're worried about prices. We can't predict our demand anymore, so we're going to pull earnings guidance as Walmart, because they know that they're going to have to pass through. Maybe it's not 100%, but they're going to have to pass through these costs to the consumer. It's going to reduce demand, and it's going to hit earnings. And so like we will pay more, and it's taxing Americans for cronyism. We are literally like, just think of what happens. You take all the steel coming into America. We say it's 20% more expensive now. Okay. Right. The American government collects that money from you.
But demand shifts to the American producers, but go
correct. So the demand at higher prices.
Not necessarily.
Yes, at higher prices, because if you didn't need the tariff, the U.S. production would already be there through market forces.
No, if you have a certain amount of production, you increase that production, but demand stays the same for domestic production, then obviously the price would go down. But also, even if demand increases, but your production capacity goes up at a faster rate, then you can also drop prices that way.
The price goes up, demand falls, and we are creating a world where in order for the U.S. to compete, we have to have higher prices. If you didn't have the tariff, the U.S. couldn't compete. You're saying that by definition, you need the tariff.
No, what you're saying is they're
compete.
cheating. What you're saying is they're cheating.
It doesn't matter.
If it was a free market,
you're still saying whether you think they're cheating or not, because cheating is a weird word. Sometimes I wonder, like, is by taking money from Chinese people to make lower cost shit for us, who are they cheating?
Or American manufacturers.
Yeah, but like every other American gets cheap steel. Like, again, this is the cronyism. We have decided.
But you hollow out the middle class and you become.
No, it's like 20,000 steelworking jobs. And by the way, you make the middle class hollow out worse because you have now made housing more expensive in the United States because steel is an input cost.
We gotta
housing.
go. We gotta go. Where can we send people to find you on the internet?
Oh God, I hope they don't find me.
No, come on. Where should they find you?
I'm like too angry about this stuff. To Twitter, I guess. Building really expensive houses for rich people, since those are the only people who are going to be able to afford it these days. I don't know. I grew up not rich, wasn't lower class, middle class, perfectly middle class. And I remember going to the stores with my mom and she, we're a Jewish family. So she looks at the price of everything like 18 times. And she's like, I don't know, milk's like $1.95. We're like, we're not going to buy the milk. And like expensive stuff sucks. It sucks. And it sucks for the average person. It doesn't suck for me. I don't care. I have enough money. I don't think about the stuff. But for the average American, expensive shit is not good. Housing being expensive, groceries being expensive, input costs of things they want to buy being expensive. This is not a good thing. This is not a good thing. And we have gotten really good at getting cheap stuff from other people. We win. We win. We have a surplus of cheap shit that you get to buy. And all we have decided is that probably less than 100,000 jobs total are worth every American paying more. And I'm going to give you like one really interesting example, two, and then I know you're going to kick me out. TSMC, because we talk about domestic manufacturing of chips, right? Like a critical supply chain. We can argue whether it's critical, why it's critical. I think a lot of it has to do with we're worried about China taking Taiwan. It's not that we think the Taiwanese are subsidizing us, but we're worried about supply. That facility in Arizona, which costs like a few $1 billion to make, right? So thank God, they built it. It was nice. It's good. Thank you, TSMC. 5,000 jobs. 350 million Americans. 5,000 jobs. This is what we're aiming. By the way, that is the most strategic industry that anyone can identify as semiconductors. And we create, and by the way, many of those jobs are temporary because they're construction. The high paying, really interesting stuff at TSMC is in Taiwan. Because it's the design work, it's the engineering work, it's the product management, it's the thinking stuff. We took the lowest paying jobs, and not that many of them, and we rode around on like a military parade about how awesome this thing is going to be, and it's like less than 10,000 jobs. Walmart will hire more people than that tomorrow. Well, not anymore, but they would have hired more people than that tomorrow. There was an announcement about in 2017, this is even before the tariffs, I believe it was in Michigan or somewhere in the Midwest, about what's the name of the manufacturer of all the iPhones? Oh my God, why can I not remember that? Foxconn. Foxconn said they were going to come in and spend like $10 billion on a manufacturing facility here. And it was going to employ like all these Americans. And they got a tax subsidy for doing that, right? Which is essentially a tariff in a different way. Right. We're going to like give you money to come here, and either we're going to take it from the Americans or we're going to take it from like the local people in that state. But you're handing this company money. So it's a tax because that money, again, the government doesn't have money. The government has to get that money from somewhere. So it takes it from the people. Right. That facility that they announced in 2017, Foxconn in America, has hired fewer than 2,000 people. They shrunk it because it was not competitive. They could not make that stuff in America competitively. And so all the stuff coming out of that Foxconn facility is too expensive. So they're shrinking it down. We tried this. We tried this already. We tried it pre-tariff through tax subsidies. It's the same idea. It's just on the other side. Like you're handing a company money either by raising prices for people or by literally handing them money in tax breaks. But it's the exact same thing. And it doesn't work. It doesn't produce nearly enough high-paying jobs. And the downfall of all of this is it just makes everything more expensive, which shrinks the economy, shrinks tax revenue. And you think people are worried about the solvency of Social Security and Medicare and our military now? Just wait. Just wait when you have a shrinking US economy and our tax revenue shrinks with it, right? The pie of America is not fixed. The pie of America grows. And when
you need American domestic manufacturing to grow the pie.
You absolutely don't, because we've been growing the pie for 30 years. And by the way, we do have American manufacturing. Yeah. We have fuck tons of American manufacturing.
Tesla, SpaceX, weaponry,
Apple,
pharmaceuticals, Apple. Yeah.
But Apple assembles, they design, they do the important stuff.
Yeah.
They do the important stuff. They do the high paying stuff. We actually are an incredibly good manufacturing group, but we're really smart. We're really smart about doing the things that are higher paid and harder and protectable. And all of a sudden, I don't understand, like in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s, we boycotted stuff because the labor jobs, right? Making sneakers, people are like, these are terrible jobs. Nobody wants them. Like, we're boycotting sweatshops. And now we're like, hey, you remember those sweatshops that we didn't like? Can we get those jobs? Can we get the sweatshop jobs back?
No. They're saying bring back machine manufacture. They're not saying to go and build sweatshops in America.
What do you think? I mean, Foxconn is like iPhone assembly, right? And
but you know how high tech it is?
Have you ever seen a picture of a Foxconn facility?
Yes.
It's like an assembly line. It's a giant assembly line with a bunch of people.
Technology.
Yeah, of course. And it's not like a fucking IKEA table. Yes. Yes, there's technology, obviously, with people putting stuff into and then if your point is that actually we're going to automate it, then we're not creating jobs. We're creating computer jobs.
Well, to be fair, we automated the production line of Tesla, and Tesla created 125,000 jobs.
Well, to be clear, we semi-automated the production line. They actually walked it back a little bit. And most of the Tesla jobs are in design and engineering.
Agreed.
They're not in manufacturing.
Where can we send people to find the biotech stuff you're doing? Give them a website so you go check it out.
I'm not sure I want my biotech world and my angry tariff world to come together because,
all right, you don't have to.
It's
Curie.Bio.
Curie.Bio. It's on my shirt. I was like, shit, should I wear this today? I don't know if I want this association.
All right. Thank you.
Anytime.
Do we agree? Kind of on some things?
I think we agree that we have to take a look.
We agree on the cheating.
There's some cheating.
Yeah, there's some cheating. We agree that tariffs can be a good short-term way to cure the cheating. And if the tariffs bring us back more to a net basis, more free trade at the end, that's a good thing.
Well, because even if you stop the cheating in China, it's really China. It's really China. We say cheating, but it's China cheating. And they do cheat. They do cheat. I can tell you biotech stories of how they cheat too. It's actually kind of crazy. I mean, it's IP theft and legitimate theft. They are not good people. Well, the people are good. The government culture is not good. I don't want to, bully an entire people. They have really rough culture about stealing stuff. But even if you tariff the Chinese stuff, there are other producers that are going to pop up. They're not United States, right? Because it's not just China. The world is not US, Europe, China. We have millions and millions and millions of other people who will pop up to fill the demand to fill the supply rather, if you tax China. So here's where I agree with you. And then we will actually wrap. If a supply chain is critical for our military, for the U.S. to protect the world, which is what we do. And that also protects free trade and it protects our businesses because we don't want pirates stealing shit on the way over. And you joke, but that's an actual real issue. I am okay saying we should pay more for some strategic military supply chains, bullets, tanks, drones, because we don't want to be in a situation where we're in a war and we can't make our own stuff. Fine.
So I got to tell you, breaking news, and then I really got to go. Trump just raised the China tariff to 125%.
I mean, look, the only country I have to say, I was at dinner last night, and they're like, but isn't China going to win? The whole world's pie is going to shrink. Everybody's going to lose. Everybody's going to lose from this. It's not like one wins and another loses. Everybody loses. China may lose worse than us. That is a true I think China may lose worse than us, but I'm not sure. I'm going to kill for this PC non-PC statement.
But
do we really want to be the tallest midget?
Do
we really want to be the tallest midget? Is that what we want?
125% on China, 90-day pause, and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during the period of 10% also affected.
Awesome, immediately. Great. I will look. I'm not like a sycophant. If Trump changes his mind and goes, actually, we want lower tariffs. The goal of tariffs is lower tariffs, and we're just going to deal with China. I will support Trump.
So ready for this? Did he call the market bottom? when he said now's a good time to buy?
Well,
And
he
then
can't.
two
He
hours
controls
later,
it. He controls it. It's
but,
like,
no, but he's going to say that he called the bottom.
you know what? We should go see how much stock he bought before he tweeted that and then took the tariffs off. All
right, bye. We got to go.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.